I took a knife for the Empress Dowager. He asked what reward I wanted. In that moment, the entire Marquise Zhongyang household rallied around the girl they'd raised, staring at me like I was the enemy. In my last life, I was so eager to expose the wet nurse's baby-swapping secret and claim them as my family, which led to the girl they doted on for 18 years, being driven from their home and dying at the hands of bandits. They resented and shunned me for the rest of my life because of it. Even later, when my husband's family tormented me and I wrote to them for help, all I got back was, "You brought it on yourself." Then they just watched as my in-laws sold me off to the borderlands, where I eventually died far from home. With a second chance at life, I refused to go down that road again. I looked up, meeting the Empress Dowager's loving gaze. I slowly bowed low and whispered softly, "This commoner has been alone and adrift my entire life. I wish, like anyone, to have someone who understands me, family to share my life with. I humbly beg your majesty to find a suitable family for me, to take me in as a daughter or sister."
My child, when girls from ordinary families are your age, they're still doted on by their parents. The situation was so dangerous just now. How did you stay so calm and rush forward to take that blade for me?
Her loving words faded. The Empress Dowager raised her slightly frail hands and gently caressed my cheek. I looked up, clearly seeing the deep concern and heartache in her eyes, so strong it almost spilled over. My nose stung, and my eyes grew moist. It had been far too long since anyone looked at me like that, or spoken to me with such warmth. My cheek nuzzled into her hand, full of longing. "Your Majesty." The Empress Dowager quickly gave a bright yes.
My child, tell me, what is it you desire? Anything within my power. I will do my utmost to grant it.
No sooner had she finished speaking, before I could even speak, the Marquise Zhongyang's family, who had been standing silently by, suddenly spoke up all at once to stop her.
Your Majesty, you absolutely cannot.
In that split second, my heart suddenly clenched. I turned and sure enough, saw the Marquise Zhongyang and his family of 3, staring at me with an intense, burning hatred. It was clear they, just like me, had been reborn. Reborn on the very day I took a blade for the Empress Dowager. In my last life, when I heard the Empress Dowager wanted to reward me, I was ecstatic. I forcefully exposed the wet nurse's baby-swapping deception, and then, with even more force, had the girl they raised banished from the household, only for her to tragically die by bandits' blades on her way back to her ancestral home. They resented me for the rest of their lives because of it, so much so that when my in-laws beat me, and I tearfully wrote to them for help, all I got was a cold, hard reply. "It served you right. Maybe it was all a mistake from the start. I shouldn't have been so naive and forced myself upon them as family. I was lost in memories of the past, unable to break free." The Empress Dowager, too, was displeased by the Marquis Zhongyang's families. Their sudden, presumptuous interruption. Deeply displeased, she slammed her hand down hard on the table and snapped,
"Impudence."
As her words rang out, the entire Marquis Zhongyang family immediately knelt down in terror. The Marquise Zhongyang's wife stammered nervously,
Your Majesty, please calm your anger. This subject only believes that this girl's sacrifice to save your Majesty was simply her duty and shouldn't be asking for a reward. She is just an insignificant commoner. A bit of money to dismiss her should suffice. Why would your Majesty need to make a personal promise?"
With those words, the Marquis Zhongyang's wife clearly intended to completely slam the door shut on me ever being recognized as family. Looks like this time around, she wants even less to have anything to do with me. I dropped my gaze, hiding my disappointment. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Fine then. I'll give her what she wants. I'll just consider it repayment for giving birth to me. But the Empress Dowager suddenly flared up at her words. She snapped,
"Nonsense. Who in this world isn't born of a father and mother? If this child gets hurt, her parents would be heartbroken too."
At her words, the Marchioness of Zhongyang, who'd been arguing so vehemently, suddenly went quiet. She instinctively turned to look at me, but she saw my eyes cast down, my aura calm and contained. It was strangely endearing. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but the Empress Dowager cut her off. Then she turned to me and spoke softly.
"Child, don't be shy. Just tell us what you want. We're here to back you up."
I looked up, meeting the Empress Dowager's kind gaze. The tightness in my chest eased considerably. I gently withdrew my hand from hers, bowed deeply, and said, voice solemn, "Your Majesty, this humble subject has no other requests, save for one long-cherished wish. I humbly beg your Majesty to see it done." The Empress Dowager's face grew serious. She nodded gently.
"Speak."
At this, the Marquis of Zhongyang's heir completely panicked. He even forgot his place, shot to his feet, and snapped,
"Shen Ruyi, you're just a commoner. To be able to shield Her Majesty from a blade, even if you bled to death, it would be your privilege. I'd advise you not to push your luck, or make unreasonable demands. You might not like the consequences."
By the end, he wasn't even pretending anymore. He just flat out threatened me. This was my own brother, blood of my blood. He looked at me with more hatred than an enemy would. I couldn't help but let out a sarcastic chuckle. I gripped my skirt, just about to retort, when a tall figure suddenly swept through the curtain. His voice was clear and powerful.
Then we'd be interested to hear what kind of request Miss Shen intends to make. That is so dire the consequences can't be borne.
As his voice faded, everyone in the tent save the Empress Dowager. Their faces instantly paled. They hastily knelt and cried out in unison.
Greetings, Your Majesty. Long live His Majesty. May Your Majesty live for 10,000 years.
I froze. I quickly turned and was about to perform the full kowtow, but the man bent down and caught my arm and said warmly with a reassuring smile,
Miss Shen, you are excused from this bow. You saved our mother, and for that we are indebted to you. From now on, whenever you see us, you are excused from kneeling.
Then, his gaze fell on my bandaged arm. His eyes deepened.
He said, later today, we'll have someone send some ointment to prevent scarring and heal wounds. To your home, Miss Shen. A young lady shouldn't have to bear scars.
Hearing his words, all I wanted to do was cry. First, the Empress Dowager's protection, now the Emperor's thoughtfulness. The imperial family are rulers, and I am but a subject, just as the Marquis of Zhongyang's family said. To lay down my life for them would be my blessing. Yet, they could put aside all differences in rank and offer me such genuine care, while my own flesh and blood would rather see me dead. A bitter taste filled my throat. I fought back the urge to cry. Under his gentle, discerning gaze, I quietly offered my thanks. This humble subject thanks Your Majesty for your benevolence.
No need to thank us. You've earned it.
With that, he released my arm and stood. His authoritative gaze swept over everyone from the Marquis Zhongyang's estate.
However, we would like to inquire just what are Marquis Zhongyang, his wife, and his heir plotting, repeatedly obstructing the Empress Dowager's decisions. Or perhaps the Marquis Zhongyang's estate has grown so powerful that it now feels it can dictate terms to the imperial family.
At his words, Marquis Zhongyang could no longer remain aloof. He kowtowed deeply, saying,
Your Majesty, forgive this subject's transgression. My foolish wife and unworthy son had absolutely no such intentions. This humble subject's loyalty to Your Majesty is beyond question. I implore Your Majesty to see the truth.
The Emperor scoffed.
It had better be.
He turned and took a seat beside the Empress Dowager. Then, picking up where he left off,
Miss Shen, please, speak your mind. What is it you need? That requires mother's intervention.
with even the Emperor having spoken, the Marquis Zhongyang's family knew. There was no turning back for them now. Every gaze directed at me was filled with bone-deep hatred. I lowered my eyes, taking in the sight of them unified against a common foe. In my past life at this very moment, I was overjoyed, believing I'd soon be reunited with my birth parents, and full of happiness. I never even noticed. There wasn't an ounce of joy in their eyes when they looked at me, only disgust and wariness. I used to believe blood was thicker than water, that once my true identity was revealed, they'd treat me just like they treated Shen Mingju. But ultimately, it was all just a one-woman show. A fantasy I'd created for myself.
Miss Shen.
Seeing my prolonged silence, the chief eunuch, bowing respectfully beside the emperor, couldn't help but gently prompt me. I snapped back to reality, took a deep breath, and bowed once more. Your Majesty, Empress Dowager, this humble subject has been alone and destitute since childhood, with no father or mother, and has never known the warmth of a family. This humble subject does not covet gold, silver, or jewels, nor wealth and glory. I only wish for a stable home, a place to belong. I earnestly implore Your Majesty and Empress Dowager to grant this humble subject's wish, and find me a family who will accept me as their daughter or sister. Silence fell as she finished speaking. The entire hall was silent. The Empress Dowager exclaimed in surprise.
Is that all?
I answered, yes. The Empress Dowager furrowed her brow slightly and looked at the supreme ruler beside her. She asked,
My son, what do you think?
The Emperor lowered his eyes, casually twirling the prayer beads in his hand. He paused to think. He said,
Miss Shen's request is a humble one. Mother, why don't you take her as your adopted daughter? You would be her mother, and we would be her elder brother, fulfilling her heart's desire.
Upon hearing this, the Empress Dowager's face lit up with joy.
The Emperor and I were indeed thinking alike. I find this child Ruyi to be utterly delightful. Since what she desires is a family, then I shall be her family.
The Empress Dowager turned her gaze towards me. In her phoenix eyes, gleaming with a soft light, there was an added depth of genuine affection and solemnity. The Emperor nodded and asked,
Shen Ruyi, are you willing?
My throat caught. My eyes welled up. All I'd ever wished for was a place to belong. Now I was being lifted to the clouds. Above me, the Empress Dowager and the Emperor both gazed at me with gentle, kind eyes, awaiting my final decision. I bowed deeply, my voice trembling, unable to hide my excitement. Your humble servant, thanks Your Majesty. The Empress Dowager for your grace, and His Majesty the Emperor for his grace." The Empress Dowager chuckled playfully.
Still so formal, aren't we?
My lips parted, and I hesitantly whispered, "Mother, big brother."
Oh,
The Empress Dowager responded joyfully, personally helping me to my feet and tenderly caressing my face. She said,
my dear child, from now on, you have a mother and a brother. You'll never be alone again.
I smiled through my tears, nodding, overwhelmed and choked up. The Emperor watched the scene with delight.
And said, Ruyi, Ruyi, meaning all wishes granted and good fortune. Your title as a princess shall be Ling'an. The official infaufment will take place after the hunting expedition. Ling'an, for now, you shall keep mother company for us.
Zhang Defa, the head eunuch by the Emperor's side, who knew how to read the room, immediately bowed low.
This humble servant greets Princess Ling'an. Congratulations, Princess. Our deepest felicitations, Princess.
With Zhang Defa leading the way, the other palace maids and eunuchs in the tent no longer hesitated. They all knelt in unison,
Crying out, Greetings, Princess Ling'an. Long live the princess. May she live for thousands of years.
"Long live the princess. May she live for thousands of years." Only the family from the Marquis of Zhongyang's estate. They seemed to still be in a state of utter shock, having never expected things to turn out this way. Finally, the Empress Dowager, looking tired, waved her hand. "All right."
That is enough. We are weary. You may all withdraw.
I had originally come to the hunting expedition as a cousin from the Marquis of Zhongyang's estate to participate in the hunt, sharing a tent with the estate's servants. Now, I had suddenly ascended to Princess Ling'an, the Empress Dowager's adopted daughter, and the Emperor's adopted sister. My status was, naturally, completely different. I naturally needed a separate residence. Zhang Defa, acting on the Emperor's orders, accompanied me to my former dwelling to collect my belongings. But my possessions were pitifully few, just a few changes of clothes. All of them hand-me-downs Shen Mingju had discarded. This reminded me of the time I was first brought back to the Marquise's estate. Back then, my heart was full of joy, eagerly anticipating reuniting with my family. But when I arrived at the Marquise's estate by carriage, I was met by a tightly shut main gate. The steward led me in through a small side door, winding through the corridors, quietly entering the courtyard of the Marquis of Zhongyang's estate. After I, naive and bewildered, had offered my greetings, she sat primly in the main seat, her brows furrowed in disgust,
And said cuttingly, "I expected as much. You've lived in the countryside for over a decade, and were bound to be unrefined and uncouth, unfit for polite society. So to prevent you from disgracing the Marquise's family name, I specifically instructed the steward to bring you in discreetly. From today onward, you will reside here as a distant relative. When the time is right, we'll find an honest, dutiful servant boy on the estate for you to marry."
I blinked blankly, and it took a long time for me to realize she didn't intend to acknowledge me as her daughter. But if she wouldn't acknowledge me, why did she have me brought back? To this, the Marquis of Zhongyang's wife replied,
Mingju is already betrothed to the Duke Zhengguo's heir. We were afraid word would get out and cause a huge scandal, so we had to make the first move.
Mingju, their precious pearl, their devotion to her was undeniable, so cherished in fact that they'd sacrifice anything for her future, even their own flesh and blood, without a second thought. I guess that is when the seed of jealousy was planted. It grew until I hated Shen Mingju with a mad intensity, even driving her to her doom, and trapping myself forever. Zhang Defa seemed to sense my sadness, and offered some comfort.
Princess, there is no need to dwell on the past. It only adds to your heartache. Now, you have the Empress Dowager and His Majesty as your dearest family. They'll bring you all the best things in the world and lay them at your feet, Princess.
I snapped back to reality. I hummed a soft nasal, Finally, I decided to leave those old clothes right where they were. I whispered, "Let's go. With new family now, there is no need to cling to the old." But as I stepped out of the tent, I saw someone I hadn't expected. Shen Mingju. This was the first time I'd seen her since my rebirth. She stood not far from the tent entrance. Sunlight glinted off the gold and silver embroidery on her skirt, making her look like a precious jade statue, carefully enshrined. Two personal attendants followed close behind her. One held an umbrella, the other carried a hand warmer. Quite the display of luxury. When she saw me emerge, she flashed a bright smile and lifted her skirt to approach me.
Ruyi.
She'd barely said my name when she seemed to remember something. Her pretty face twisted into a wronged expression.
From now on, I suppose I should address you as Princess Ling'an, shouldn't I?
Playing dumb, I didn't say a word, just watching her quietly. In my last life, I absolutely loathed her. She had clearly stolen everything that was rightfully mine, yet she always played the victim. All she had to do was shed a few tears, just a single drop, and everyone would rush to comfort her. That is why I went to such lengths to expose the truth and have her thrown out of the estate. I didn't regret going too far in my last life, even though it led to her death. A life for a life. That is just how karma works. I reined in my thoughts and offered a small smile. Not only should you address me as princess, I told her, but according to rank, you also owe me a bow. The moment I spoke, the words hung in the air. Shen Mingju's face went crimson. Her face turned mortified. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks. She clearly hadn't expected me to show her absolutely no mercy and disgrace her in front of everyone.
Ruyi,
Shen Mingju's voice went soft.
I know you're upset. But during your time at the Marquise's estate, I truly believe I treated you well enough.
The implication being that I had no reason to make things hard for her. I stared silently into her tear-filled eyes. Suddenly, I found it all rather laughable. Treated me well enough. What was she even talking about? Her feigned generosity, giving me her hand-me-down clothes. Or when the Marquise's servants gossiped, calling me a poor relative just sponging off the family. And her kind interventions, her casual comfort afterward.
Ruyi, don't take what they say to heart. After all, you did come from the countryside. It is only natural they'd need time to adjust. Once you've lived here a bit longer and learned some manners, they won't act like this anymore.
A master who forgets their duty should be punished, but she had stolen my identity. She watched me get humiliated again and again. Now, I'm throwing every single word she once said right back at her. I told her she truly was a country bumpkin. And even after being the young lady of the Marquise's estate for over 10 years, she still couldn't shake off the petty small-mindedness deep in her bones. At this point, Mingju couldn't put it off any longer. She slowly bent her knee, her movements so slow, as if she were wading through mud, each step heavy with sorrow and bitterness.
This subject greets Princess Ling'an.
Her voice was a mere whisper, like willow catkins carried by the wind. As long as I didn't tell her to rise, she'd have to stay in that half-kneeling pose. Mingju had never endured such hardship before. Her legs trembled like a frail willow in the wind, but she didn't dare move a muscle. Just then, accompanied by a rush of hurried footsteps, the Marquise of Chongyang's anxious cry echoed from behind me.
Mingju.
Seeing the Marquise of Chongyang and the heir apparent, Mingju seemed to find her anchor. Tears immediately welled up and spilled. She whimpered, "Mother," in a wronged, pitiful voice.
Brother, my poor child.
You've been so wronged.
The Marquise of Chongyang immediately stepped forward and pulled her into a loving embrace. In the previous life, they were separated by death. This life, she'd been lost and found again. Naturally, it made her cherish Mingju even more. The heir apparent, Shen Mingyuan, was absolutely fuming and fiercely rebuked me.
Shen Ruyi, don't think being a princess means you can act above the law. If you dare lay a hand on Mingju again in this life, I'll make you pay even if it costs me my life.
Mingyuan.
The Marquise of Chongyang snapped coldly, cutting him off before he could say more. My status wasn't what it used to be. If they tried to use their old Marquise's tricks on me, they'd only be inviting disaster. Shen Mingyuan realized it too. He took a deep breath and grudgingly swallowed the harsh words he was about to say. The Marquise of Chongyang then turned to me, her expression complex as she looked at me. She took a deep breath and softened her demeanor a bit.
Princess, may I have a word with you in private?
I curled my lips in a sneer. The Marquise and I have never had anything to say to each other, so why would we need to speak privately? In my past life, after hearing of Mingju's death, I was filled with guilt. I wanted to explain that it wasn't my intention, but she coldly and sternly shut me out.
I have nothing to discuss with you. Mingju is dead, and whatever meager mother-daughter bond we had is gone forever.
Later, when I endured hardships at my husband's home, I hoped countless times that she would protect me, just like she is protecting Mingju today, suddenly appearing to shield me, but she never did, not once. Living this life again, I no longer had any expectations of her. The Dowager Empress's tent was set up on the highest hill on the north side of the hunting grounds. Though the tent's furnishings were simple, they still exuded a royal elegance. I was settled in a small tent next to the main one. Though it was called a small tent, it was many times more spacious than my previous lodging. Inside, thick felt rugs were laid, and fine silver thread charcoal burned, making it wonderfully warm and cozy. Palace maids streamed in, bringing hot water, towels, and clean clothes to help me wash and change. The wet nurse sent by the Dowager Empress to attend me chattered playfully.
Her Majesty, the Dowager Empress, specifically instructed that the princess should be dressed to look radiant and captivating, so all the noble ladies could feast their eyes, and for her to proudly show off her newly found daughter.
Every word revealed the Dowager Empress's precious regard and deep affection for me. My thoughts drifted. I thought back to before. Back then, when I suddenly found out I had a mother too. I'd rushed to sit before the mirror getting ready. I pulled out the only decent outfit I owned and put it on, practicing my bows over and over in the mirror, and thinking about what I should say, or what kind of smile would be just right. But what I got instead were tightly shut doors and a stolen identity. My birth mother claimed I grew up in the sticks, too crude to bear, but she seemed to forget one thing. It was her precious adopted daughter who'd taken my place. That is why I ended up like that. Even after the truth came to light, all she still wanted was to erase me. As I was lost in thought, a graceful figure quietly drew near. She gestured to the maids and nannies, who almost cried out in surprise. She gently raised a finger, making a shushing gesture. Then she took a phoenix tail hairpin and placed it in my hair, carefully adjusting it. She looked at me, smiling.
This hairpin, it makes Ling'an look even more elegant.
That is when I snapped out of it. Startled, I almost stood up. Your Majesty, but she gently pressed me back down.
See, you called me that again.
I pursed my lips, then shyly whispered, Mother.
Oh my dear. Ha ha ha.
Her hearty reply made my eyes well up again. I quickly lowered my gaze, afraid to meet her eyes so full of motherly love, fearing that any second now I'd break down and cry right there. But the Empress Dowager insisted on cupping my face, gently wiping the corners of my eyes with her handkerchief.
She chided, Silly girl, what is there to cry about? You have so many good days ahead of you.
I sniffled, swallowing back a sob. You're right, Mother. The Empress Dowager nodded, pleased. Then she turned to look at my reflection in the mirror, looking me over from every angle and reaching out to smooth a few stray hairs by my temples. Then finally, she took my hand and stood up.
Come, let's go to the banquet.
My heart warmed. I let her lead me out of the tent. Outside the tent, dusk was settling. The setting sun painted the whole hunting ground in hues of gold and crimson. A cool evening breeze swept through, and cooking smoke drifted lazily into the sky. Noble women gathered in small groups, chatting casually. Seeing the Empress Dowager emerge, they all bowed deeply. The Empress Dowager waved her hand dismissively, secretly gripping my hand tighter when I tried to pull it back.
She announced loudly, You may all rise. I'm sure you've all heard the news. Today, we have taken a new adopted daughter, and the Emperor himself has bestowed upon her the title of Princess Ling'an.
As her words landed, all eyes, those of the noblewoman, turned to me. Some were curious, some were scrutinizing, and some offered genuine congratulations. I nodded with a smile to each in turn, not daring to let my guard down for an instant. But amidst all the well wishes, I sharply caught a particularly complex gaze. Following that gaze, Lady Zhang Yongho stood at the edge of the crowd, with Shen Mingju tucked into her arms, staring fixedly at me. Her eyes held resentment and a deep-seated anger, and a touch of something I couldn't quite decipher, a kind of wistfulness. Shen Mingju, nestled in her arms, was pale. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying just moments ago. When she saw me looking, she quickly turned her face away, burying her head in Lady Zhang Yongho's shoulder. Lady Zhang Yonghao instinctively tightened her arms around her, protecting her. At the same time, she met my gaze. In that moment, I thought she'd say something, but she said nothing at all. She just slowly lowered her gaze and, holding Shen Mingju, turned and walked away. Their retreating figures held an unspeakable desolation. Once I was formally recognized as the Empress Dowager's daughter and the Emperor's sister, life became far more stable and secure than I'd ever imagined. My mother constantly worried about her daughter, reminding me to dress warmly when the weather turned cool, and sending someone to check on my well-being when it got windy. Even my brother, despite his countless daily duties, often sent fresh fruits and seasonal delicacies and luxurious silks, as if afraid I, his found sister, might feel overlooked. They truly doted on me. In no time at all, I became the darling of the entire capital, sought after by all. Those who once couldn't avoid me fast enough now eagerly competed to send their calling cards. Those who wouldn't even give me the time of day before now told everyone they met that we were old acquaintances. At every banquet, I was always surrounded by the capital's noblewomen, all vying for my attention. The supreme glory that once belonged to Shen Mingju was now entirely bestowed upon me, of course. But what truly stoked Shen Mingju's jealousy and resentment was her fiancé's undeniable regard for me.
The princess is truly brave, possessing a courage rarely seen in noblewomen. I heard that on the day the Empress Dowager was attacked, the Imperial Guard had all been deployed elsewhere. It was the princess who remained calm amidst the chaos and stepped forward fearlessly.
Wei Xiaoyuan, the heir to the Duke of Zhengguo's estate, revered courage, and his words were filled with nothing but admiration for me. I subtly lowered my gaze and offered no reply.
You flatter me, young Master Wei.
Wei Xiaoyuan simply smiled and didn't say anything further, then turned and walked away, joining his companions. He had only paused briefly to exchange a few words with me, yet it was enough to ignite Shen Mingju's intense jealousy. I turned my head and was met with her face, etched with jealousy and pure resentment.
Shen Ruyi, she began. I suppose you're feeling quite pleased with yourself right now, aren't you? You didn't manage to reclaim your rightful place as the legitimate daughter of the Marquis of Zhongyang's estate, yet you instantly became Princess Ling'an. and even made my fiancé look upon you with such favor.
I replied calmly, "You're overthinking things." After this period of calm reflection, I finally had an epiphany, just how narrow-minded I had been in my past life. Because of a momentary obsession, I had trapped myself in a tiny world of trivial gains and losses. But fate, it seems, has a twisted sense of humor. This time, it was Shen Mingju who was left to curse the heavens and lament her fate. Months later, a grand palace banquet, held to celebrate a major victory at the border, commenced in the imperial garden. The lanterns blazed, making it as bright as day. During the feast, the emperor raised his cup and declared with a hearty laugh, "This magnificent victory is largely thanks to the border defense map drawn by Princess Ling'an, which allowed our great Liang soldiers to clearly understand the opposing factions' movements, seize the initiative, and defeat the many with few, achieving a complete victory." No sooner had his words fallen than Shen Mingyuan instinctively gasped. How could Sudi have drawn it? His wide, staring eyes were filled with nothing but shock and utter disbelief. In his eyes, a crude woman like me, raised in the countryside, could absolutely not have drawn a border defense map. But he seemed to have forgotten that in my previous life, my husband's family sold me off cheaply to the outsiders. After escaping by the skin of my teeth to ensure my survival, I struggled for years to survive in those harsh, desolate lands. I was already intimately familiar with the border's terrain and troop distributions, as well as its climate and resources. At his blatant disrespect, the Empress Dowager frowned in displeasure and sternly rebuked him. "Heir to the Marquis of Zhongyang, what is the meaning of this behavior? Are you perhaps suggesting that we and the Emperor are speaking without thought?" Shen Mingyuan's face flushed crimson, and he stammered urgently, "Your Majesty, that map was clearly impudent." The Marquis of Zhongyang sharply interrupted. Leaping to his feet, he snatched the wine cup from Shen Mingyuan's hand and splashed it across his face. He roared, "You insolent child, such outrageous words, and before the Emperor. Now kneel and beg forgiveness from His Majesty, the Empress Dowager, and the princess." Shen Mingyuan wiped the cold wine from his face, still defiant inside. He started to argue, but then he looked up and met the emperor's amused, almost mocking gaze. A shiver ran down his spine. He snapped back to his senses. Quickly he knelt and kowtowed, pleading for mercy. "This subject spoke out of turn due to drink, and offended your imperial majesty, and dared disrespect the princess. This subject knows his transgression." The emperor, idly swirling his wine, calmly said, "Rise. We'll let it slide this time, but if it happens again, you won't be so lucky." With that, the emperor fell silent. Then, the chief eunuch Shang Defa, who had been quietly attending by His Majesty's side, stepped forward, flicked his whisk, and announced in a loud voice, "By imperial decree, Princess Ling'an is hereby granted a fiefdom of 1,000 households, 10,000 taels of gold, a hu of pearls from the eastern sea, 100 bolts of cloud brocade, and furthermore, the Spring Radiance Garden in the imperial suburbs is bestowed upon the princess to serve as her personal estate." The sheer generosity of the gifts left everyone speechless. Spring Radiance Garden, built during the previous emperor's time, was a private estate constructed for his most cherished Princess Kaoyang. Its scenery was breathtaking, and its hot spring baths were legendary in the capital. It had never been granted to anyone else before. A hush fell over the hall. Then, an uncontainable wave of gasps broke out, followed by hushed whispers. Countless eyes were fixed on me, burning with curiosity. I rose from my seat and bowed deeply and properly. "Your imperial sister thanks her imperial brother for his immense grace." The emperor personally extended a hand to help me up, smiling, "Come on, get up. No need for all this formality among family." The Empress Dowager also smiled, patting my hand. For some, this display was particularly galling. As I stood, I caught a glimpse of the Marquis of Zhongyang's table out of the corner of my eye. The Marchioness of Zhongyang had her head down, her expression unreadable, only her hands tightly clenching a handkerchief. Shen Mingju, however, was ashen, her eyes glued to the wine cup on the table before her. Her fingertips were white with strain. The imperial banquet continued in a rather subtle atmosphere. After a few rounds of drinks, the mood began to lighten once more. A noblewoman proposed, "Why don't we play Pass the Flower to liven things up?" The drums began to beat. Tevin Dum Dum. A silk flower was swiftly passed among the guests. Suddenly, the drumming ceased. The silk flower, as if guided, landed perfectly in my hand. All eyes in the hall converged on me once more. At that moment, Shen Mingju, seeing this, excitedly sprang to her feet. She gloated, "Princess Ling'an, you've made such an incredible contribution to our border victory and received such lavish rewards from His Majesty. And now you've even won the first round. Shouldn't you grace us with a performance to add to the festivities?" The Marchioness of Zhongyang frowned in disapproval. "Mingju, Princess Ling'an is of noble status. All the more reason then. Shen Mingju cut her off loudly, her eyes burning as she stared at me. After all, she continued, it has always been our tradition in Great Liang for the ruler and the people to share in joy. Isn't that right? Princess Ling'an herself came from the common people. If she were to forget her origins and become arrogant and self-important now, wouldn't that be a disservice to the love and esteem of His Majesty and the Empress Dowager and the hopes of the common folk? Everyone knows. I grew up in the countryside. I never learned to play the zither, chess, calligraphy, or painting. Shen Mingju knew this perfectly. She was intentionally putting me on the spot. She fully intended to make a fool of me. I frowned slightly. I was trying to figure out how to handle it. Then, a clear male voice rang out completely out of the blue. Who says a talent performance has to be about poetry, music, or scholarly arts? This subject has heard that the princess grew up among the common folk. She must surely possess skills we wouldn't even know about. Why not let everyone here witness them? Shen Mingju followed the sound with her gaze. She saw Wei Xiaoyuan, seated among the military officials. He was gazing at me from across the hall, an appreciative look in his eyes. In an instant, her face went utterly white. Regret and jealousy surged through her like a tidal wave. She never, in a million years, expected this. After all her careful plotting to dig a pit for me, her own fiancé had personally stepped in to rescue me. This felt 100 times worse than death itself. Shen Mingju's hands, hidden in her sleeves, clenched into tight fists. She shot me a venomous look. I pretended not to notice. I rose calmly, a slight smile on my face. Then Princess Ling'an will make a humble attempt to entertain you all today. I had someone bring me a pair of bamboo chopsticks and an empty bowl. Guests murmured, trying to guess what I intended to do. Shen Mingju, however, just thought I was trying to be mysterious. A gloating expression reappeared on her face. But the very next second, they saw me hold the bamboo chopsticks to my lips. As I closed my eyes then opened them again, my entire presence shifted dramatically. A low, mournful sound spilled from my lips. It was the sound of the north wind howling across the Gobi Desert, whirling with sand and grit. The bamboo chopsticks trembled slightly. Slowly, the wind's cry blended with the thunder of hooves, the clang of armor, and the mournful wail of war horns. The previously boisterous hall instantly fell silent. Everyone's eyes were wide with disbelief. They stared at me in utter disbelief. I flicked my tongue against the roof of my mouth. The thud of hooves grew from a distant rumble to a pounding crescendo. My hands lightly patted my chest. The clatter of metal armor rang out. From my throat, the mournful cry of a bullhorn rumbled. Deep and tragic, it vibrated deep in every person's chest. In my past life, when I was stranded at the borderlands, I met an old soldier. He had once been a scout, delivering messages in the army. He used vocal mimicry to transmit messages, mimicking birds and beasts to sound alarms. During our time together, he taught me these skills, just as everyone was deeply immersed in my exquisite vocal performance. All the vivid, clamorous sounds abruptly ceased. In the profound silence, a single sigh, light as the wind through an empty tent. Then I opened my mouth and began to sing. In March, when willows turned to gold, I sent my sweetheart off to Dunhuang Old. In June, when days stretched long and hot, the border parched, the earth forgot. In September, autumn winds blow chill, in northern lands, frost falls still. In December, snow blankets the sky, a victory message at Jade Gate flies. Don't ask how many lie beneath the sand, just know brave men defended our land. Daughters don't wait on, year after year. My voice wasn't loud. It carried the rough grit of desert sand, the burning bite of strong liquor. Mother, your son won't be coming home. The final line, a whispered breathy murmur, faded into silence. The entire hall was utterly silent. Wei Xiaoyuan was the first to snap out of it and started to applaud for me. Princess Ling'an, that performance of yours spoke volumes. From that day on, my reputation spread far and wide. The title of Princess Ling'an became truly fitting. No one dared to criticize it anymore. The Marquis of Xiangyang, who had always ignored me, actually stopped me after a court assembly one day, blocking my way in front of the archway. I raised my eyes, my gaze cold. Marquis of Xiangyang, what can I do for you? The Marquis of Xiangyang began. Shen Ruyi, in this life, though you've won the emperor's favor and risen to become a princess, you still have the blood of my Shen family flowing in your veins. No matter what happens, that is a fact no one can deny. The corner of my lips curled into a sneer. And your point is? Royal affection can be fleeting, but your family can be your shelter. The Marquis of Xiangyang stated. He was implying I should use my status as a princess to pave the way for him and Shen Mingyuan to climb the ranks. I couldn't help but laugh. I laughed a bitter, shaking sound. I scoffed. Marquis, you've been in these political circles for years and lived 2 lifetimes. How can you still be so naive? Royal affections run cold, but your entire Marquis Zhongyang household. Were your actions towards me in my past life any less cruel? No, you were utterly heartless and ungrateful, cold-blooded to the core in fact. And you dare talk about family protection? Then I must ask you, Marquis, in my past life, when my husband's family tormented me and sold me off to the border, where were you then? And where was this family you're so quick to champion? And now you come to me, talking about family protection. Doesn't that sound incredibly hypocritical? The resentment was always there, simmering. It was impossible for it not to be. I just kept it buried deep. Once unleashed, it poured out like a dam breaking, and couldn't be stopped. Marquis, let me make one thing perfectly clear. Times have changed. While I may not wield limitless power, with my status as Princess Ling'an, to uproot your entire Marquis Zhongyang household, I'm perfectly capable of doing just that. My words left the Marquis Zhongyang's face an ugly shade of green. His lips quivered for a moment, unable to utter another word. I turned and walked away, my steps unhurried and calm. I'd only taken a few steps when his heavy voice reached me from behind. Are you truly going to be so unforgiving? My steps didn't falter. I simply replied coolly, Marquis, I'm not the unforgiving one. That would be all of you. Back at the princess's residence, my personal maid, Qinghe, came to greet me and quietly said, Princess, you're back. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager just sent over some fresh cherries. She said they were the first of the season's tribute and saved them just for you. I gazed at the basket of plump, glistening red cherries, and a warmth spread through my chest. Get my brush and paper ready. I want to write a formal thank you to my mother. Qinghe nodded and went to fetch them. I sat by the window, picked up my brush, ready to write, but then hesitated, setting it down. Outside, the crabapple blossoms were in full bloom. A gentle breeze swept through, sending petals fluttering to the ground. Everything from my past life flashed before my eyes like a revolving lantern. The humiliation of being rejected, my birth mother's cold indifference and cruelty, my birth father's utter disregard, my brother's utter disdain, the abuse and degradation at the hands of my husband's family, who then sold me off, the biting winds and frost of the frontier, and that desperate plea for help which vanished without a trace, and the dismissive, you brought it on yourself. But all of that, with my rebirth, was left behind in my past life. In this life, I am Ruyi. I am Ling'an, with the Empress Dowager as my mother, the Emperor as my brother, and my own title, estate, and lands. No longer do I need to grovel or beg for anyone's attention or affection, but for the Marquis Zhongyang household, their reckoning has only just begun. The Duke Zhengguo's family officially called off the engagement to the Marquis Zhongyang household. The reason was simple. My true identity as the legitimate daughter of the Marquis Zhongyang household had finally been exposed by someone with an agenda. Wei Xiaoyuan simply stated, my Wei family does not ally itself with the heartless and dishonorable. Shen Mingju completely lost it on the spot. She lunged at the Marquis Zhongyang, the Marquis Zhongyang's wife, and Shen Mingyuan, screaming and yelling, throwing a tantrum, and demanding answers. All traces of her usual gentle demeanor gone. Why didn't you acknowledge her back then? If you had just recognized her from the start and raised her properly here, Xiaoyuan never would have broken off our engagement. Now I have nothing left. Everything's gone. The Marchioness of Zhongyang collapsed into the grand armchair. Racked with remorse, tears streamed down her face, unable to utter a single word. The Marquis of Zhongyang, however, couldn't stand to see Shen Mingju acting so deranged and wild. He slapped her hard across the face and roared angrily, shut your mouth. What right do you have to blame us? When it comes down to it, our refusal to acknowledge her was all for your sake, wasn't it? For you. We abandoned our own daughter, becoming heartless and ungrateful people. And now you're repaying our kindness with malice and turning the blame on us. Do you even realize how much Mingyuan and I are shunned at court now? Every day, people are whispering behind our backs, saying we lack virtue and are unfit for important positions. But Shen Mingju, unable to change her selfish nature, kept screaming, I don't care. It is all your fault, no matter what. If I can't marry Xiaoyuan, then Shen Ruyi won't get off easy either. Shen Mingju uttered these words through gritted teeth, her eyes wild with hysterical madness. The Marchioness of Zhongyang suddenly looked up, staring at her in disbelief, as if seeing this daughter she had raised for the first time. Mingju, what did you say? Shen Mingju hissed, I want her dead. With that, disregarding everything, she stumbled out the door. The Marquis of Zhongyang roared, stop her. But it was already too late. The next morning, just as I woke up, Qinghe informed me with a grave expression. News came from the Marquis of Zhongyang's estate. After Shen Mingju's engagement was broken off by the Duke of Zhengguo's family yesterday, she lost her mind. She stormed into the ancestral hall, smashed your Royal Highness's longevity tablet, and even set the hall on fire. I paused as I was dressing. How bad was the fire? Luckily, it was discovered in time, and only half the ancestral hall burned down. But Shen Mingju is gone. I was silent for a moment, then nodded, showing I understood. understood. Qinghe, however, looked worried. Your Royal Highness, do you think she'll try to harm you? I walked to the window and pushed open the panes. The morning light was faint. The crabapple blossoms in the courtyard had been scattered across the ground by the night rain, leaving scattered crimson petals. If she dares to come, she'll walk right into my trap. And that trap, I've been laying it for ages. 3 days later, I took my carriage to Huguo Temple to burn incense and pray for the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. Halfway through the journey, a cold arrow suddenly shot out from the dense woods by the roadside. The arrow embedded itself in the carriage window frame, its fletching still humming. Someone shouted, "Assassin, protect the princess." Before the words even faded, dozens of figures in black burst from the woods. Blades flashed as they charged directly at the carriage. The Imperial Guards quickly formed ranks to meet them. I lifted a corner of the carriage curtain and coldly watched the fight outside. These men in black were well trained, but they weren't soldiers. Their fighting style had a wild, bandit-like edge. Amidst all this chaos, Shen Mingju, clutching a dagger, charged straight at me. "Shen Ruyi, I'll kill you." In that moment, the Imperial Guards and the assassins seemed to have made a pact, spontaneously clearing a wide path to allow Shen Mingju to attack me. But just as she was almost upon me, one of the men in black used the flat of his blade to violently strike the dagger from her grasp. Shen Mingju cried out in pain and was instantly pinned to the ground by the Imperial Guards. The next instant, both sides ceased their combat. With Qinghe as support, I slowly descended from the carriage. "You." Her eyes widened as the realization dawned on her. "Shen Ruyi, you set me up." I offered a slight smile. "If you hadn't been so intent on killing me, how would you have taken the bait?" I leaned in slightly, looking down at her from above. "Tell me, what exactly is the penalty for attempting to assassinate a princess? What could it be? It is such a mystery, isn't it?" Ultimately, Shen Mingju was thrown into the imperial dungeons. The moment the news broke, the Marchioness Zhongyang was on her knees outside the princess's residence, pleading for her beloved daughter. Qinghe asked me, "Princess, will you see her?" I did. After just a few days, the Marchioness Zhongyang looked significantly older. Streaks of white now threaded her temples, and deep shadows sagged beneath her eyes. Gone was the dignified noblewoman who once sat high in her hall, glaring at me with contempt and calling me crude and common. The moment she entered, she dropped to her knees. "Princess, I beg of you. Please, for the sake of our shared blood." I cut her off. "Madam, do you truly have the right to speak of blood ties?" She visibly trembled, tears streaming down her face. "I know I've wronged you. But Mingju is innocent. She didn't know anything. She just loved Prince Wei too much." "Innocent?" I let out a mocking laugh. "I'll grant you in my past life I wronged her. My jealousy turned to hatred and led to her untimely demise. So you hated me. You cast me aside. You stood by and watched me perish. I accept all of it. But in this life, have I hurt her in any way? I never exposed her true identity. I never forced her from the household. I never even touched a hair on her head. She was the one who kept pushing. She was the one consumed by jealousy. She was the one." I paused. Then I spoke, each word weighted. "She brought this all upon herself." Those words landed like a heavy blow. The Marchioness Zhongyang crumpled, as if all the strength had been drained from her. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood up and turned my back to her. "Qinghe, escort her out." Shen Mingju's case was processed swiftly, with witnesses and evidence aplenty. She had no grounds for denial. The Ministry of Justice sentenced her to immediate execution. 3 months passed. The Zhongyang Marquisate had returned to its usual quiet. Shen Mingju had been buried in a rush. Rumor had it the Marchioness Zhongyang clutched Shen Mingju's memorial tablet and wept through the entire night. The next morning, she never woke up again. The imperial physician attributed it to a sudden surge of grief and anger, resulting in a stroke and paralysis. She would spend the rest of her days confined to her bed. The Marquis Songyang petitioned for retirement. The emperor granted his request. Shen Mingyuan was stripped of his official post, reverting to a commoner. The once prominent Zhongyang Marquisate had fallen into ruin. When word of this reached me, I was in the imperial garden, admiring chrysanthemums with the Empress Dowager. I felt a flicker of something, a brief moment of haze, then nothing. I simply continued to chat and laugh with the Empress Dowager. Past lives, present lives, debts and grievances. And with that, all scores were settled. Now, I couldn't be more content.